This is William K. Murtaugh, Mark Witness 1, and this is Sunday, November 10th, 2020. And it's either going to be day 96 or day 97, probably 97, of Phil McConnell being in jail. Not much is going on today. Phil McConnell is yet in jail for another day while Tim Holmseth is free to spread his little propaganda around. And speaking of Tim Holmseth, I wanted to bring up something that should have been obvious to Northwest Liberty News when they were covering Cynthia Abzug's situation. Now, Northwest Liberty mocked the media for reporting that QAnon was somehow involved, and he used the example of Cynthia and her friend visiting a country club with several QAnons present. But he apparently didn't bother to check to see why Cynthia Abzug would think that QAnon was involved in this situation and why QAnon was even mentioned, regardless of what the reality is about what QAnon is all about, and so on and so forth, and why Cindy should not have been given this impression. All one needs to do is look at this Facebook page, this image in particular. There for all to see is the Q monogram. Now, Timothy Charles Holmseth affiliated himself with Q in his own mind since before the Cynthia Abzug case came about, and so did Phil McConnell. Now, if Jim, or whatever his name is, from Northwest Liberty News had bothered to go to some of these various websites that are operated by both the Children's Crusade and Timothy Holmseth, they would have seen that there is a distinct claim of affiliation with QAnon, just as there is a distinct claim that there is a Pentagon pedophile task force and that Phil McConnell is directly affiliated with this organization, and Tim Holmseth is serving as what could be defined as a press secretary. You also see that they have frequently talked about being a part of Q, and in fact that the Q philosophy was playing a big part of everything they were doing. That QAnon was giving them messages as well as to the general public. And they implied that a member of QAnon was the one that was behind the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. You know, when you put it into context, there is justification for the media reporting that Cynthia Abzug was involved with Q because she claimed that on her own, according to the police report. I think what Northwest Liberty News did at that time was something they're accusing the mainstream media of, and that is prejudging the content before you have the full story. Now, this is a criticism that's often made about the mainstream media. That criticism becomes irrelevant when you engage in the same practices you're accusing them of. So I think that social media pundits may need to clean their own house before they start talking about the dirt in somebody else's house. Now, something else happened just before I left today that originally I wasn't going to say anything, but I figure I'm going to say it in case somebody else comes up with this bright idea. I had someone direct message me today It said that they would pay all my expenses to Fort Lauderdale. Generous offer. And I know the person is good for it. But there was a condition attached to this offer. And that condition was that this individual would have complete editorial control over how I report the trial and how I cover it. In other words, I would become an employee of this individual. I would be behooving to this individual for everything I say and do. I would have to get clearance from this individual before I report on anything. This is something I will not do. I will not take money for these trips on the condition that I report the way one individual wants it reported. I will not become a propagandist. I feel it's wrong, I feel it's unethical, and I feel it's not fair to my other subscribers, people that are going to pay for honest coverage of these events. Now, of course, I can't guarantee that I won't be biased. I certainly have a bias of one type or another with Field McConnell, Tim Holseth, and the trial itself. But on the other hand, I am not going to alter my style to target an individual, target a group, or simply slant my coverage to suit the purposes of one individual or one group of individuals. It is my intent that no matter what I do on YouTube or elsewhere on social media, that I be independent of anybody's control. Once you give that kind of control to someone, you diminish who you are and what your mission is, and I simply will not do that. Now, I talked a little bit briefly last night about the $7 war. And basically what the $7 war is there are people out there that for some strange reason have attached a conspiracy theory to the Title IV flag. Now, all the Title IV is a official listing of how you display the flag, how the flag should be made, and so on and so forth. So the Title IV hoax is garbage. Now, where the people seem to get ammunition for this theory is that there are times that you are going to see the United States flag with gold fringes around it. Now, the reason for the gold fringes is because the flags are part of the United States government itself. The gold fringe flags are used by the military. The gold fringe flags will show up in the White House and at certain occasions at government offices or functions. That's the reason for the gold fringe. There's no hidden agenda, there's no hidden message. The postmaster of the world doesn't have a patent or copyright on these flags. It's just one part of our flag. And to me, making a mountain out of a molehill is rather silly, but this is the nature of these conspiracy theorists, is they take something that is nothing and make a whole big deal out of it. That's what's being done here. Now, someone decided they were going to call up the Pierce County Courthouse. For what reason, I don't know. They're not going to let Field McConnell out based on how many phone calls they get to their switchboard. And they certainly are not going to listen to a bunch of gibberish about sovereign citizen philosophies and all these weird theories going around about the government ceasing to be a government and there's an alternative government and all this, that, the other thing. It's just not happening. that these people decide to waste the taxpayers' money by requiring sheriff's deputies to intercept these phone calls and put up with them and take away from other business. You wonder how many robberies go unanswered or how many emergencies go unanswered because these people are tying up the switchboards by the hundreds with these kind of phone calls. And it's doing a disservice to the taxpayers of that jurisdiction that these people are engaging in this kind of childish nonsense. Now, Field McConnell has been accused of a criminal act. He's been accused of multiple counts of cyber harassment, cyber stalking, making death threats against the mother of 3 children. And that's the only thing that should be important here, not some political agenda that's behind his actions. Now, Field McConnell had stuck to the message, which is whatever this political nonsense is he's espousing, this fake children's crusade, the fake Pentagon pedophile task force. Everything would have been hunky-dory. He would have been able to go on and do his thing on a daily basis and not be in jail. But Field McConnell decided that he was going to listen to Timothy Charles Holmseth and got himself roped into this vendetta against the mother of 3 children in Florida. A vendetta for something that this woman is not guilty of. And it's ridiculous for people to believe this stuff, but they do. People blindly believe the message because of the messenger. That if Field McConnell says it, it must be true. If Timothy Holmseth says it, it must be true. And that's the wrong reason to believe in something. If people were to believe something simply because I say it's true, then that would be equally wrong. They need to check out for themselves what the facts are, and not by reading a book that Tim Holmseth wrote or listening to pundits. They do it by independent research. They look into the court records. They look for police reports. They look for what the police did in response to any police report. They look for multiple sources, public and private. And then they make a judgment based on that. We are all a 13th juror here. It's up to us to make up our own mind. But we can't be taking things as fact simply because of the messenger of those items. You can't take as fact anything that I say because I'm the one saying it. The same way you can't take it as fact just because it is Field McConnell or Tim Holmseth saying it. You have to judge for yourselves. You have to decide for yourselves. And this is why I try to keep pounding this into people's heads. Don't be a puppet. Be independent. That's why I turned down this cash offer. Because I don't want to be a puppet. I want to be independent. Now, this coming week is going to be rather interesting. Now, tomorrow, there's going to be a hearing in court in Pierce County. This is not part of the trial. It's what might be referred to as housekeeping. These are usually pre-trial hearings that happen in more elaborate cases. But the judge in this situation felt it was necessary to have this additional hearing so everyone, that includes Field McConnell as well as the Wisconsin Prosecutor's Office and by extension the state of Florida, understands what the judge needs in order to go forward with this process. And he is going to make it clear to Tim Holmseth, or the judge is going to make it clear. I forgot what gender the judge is. I assume it's a male, but I might be wrong. But anyway, the judge is going to make it clear that Field McConnell either has to file paperwork himself and not by a power of attorney, or he's going to need to get a bar licensed attorney. Because people cannot file paperwork on Field McConnell's behalf as a power of attorney. They cannot be an attorney of any kind. It's not allowed. It's in the state constitution. It's the law. And so that's what it's going to have to be made clear to Field McConnell. Field McConnell is going to have to personally submit any more paperwork to the court. And as far as what's going on Wednesday, which is the actual hearing, this is what the judge is spelling out. Now, it's somewhere around 9 in the morning, Central Time, I believe, is one of these activities. Either the hearing in regards to the housekeeping or the hearing in regards to the extradition. Now, on Wednesday, this is where we should see the beginning of the end of this process. Unless there's something that comes up Wednesday that causes the judge to issue another extension, the final ruling is going to be in place to get Field McConnell sent to Florida. And based on what I've been able to figure out so far, Field McConnell is coming to Florida. There is no chance in hell that he is getting out of jail, either on his own recognizances or as an outright release. He is going to Florida. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's one of these things you just have to wait and see what happens on the day in question. Because I really didn't expect it to go quite this long. I figured there might have been some other reason why Field would have been held over for another few days, while things get in order. But I had anticipated that Field McConnell would have been in the Broward County Jail on or before Valentine's Day. Now, while it is possible that that could happen, it's beginning to look less and less likely that it will. At the earliest, he would be in Florida the 17th of March, or the 17th of February, because once the ruling is made, Florida then has to make arrangements to bring him down. And that would probably take a couple days to arrange. Now, someone in my comments suggested that Field McConnell is going to be transported to Florida by ground transportation, that he would be brought down in a van. Now, it is my understanding that this is not correct, or wasn't correct. It was my understanding that two members of the Broward County SWAT team, who are trained in prisoner transport, would fly up to Wisconsin and bring Field McConnell back on a commercial flight. Ironically, it might be Southwest that is the carrier. Now, that may change because of what Field McConnell did in filing paperwork with the court. Field McConnell complains that because of a number of illnesses, one apparently having to do with ear popping, would preclude him from flying. Now, I'm not sure why Field McConnell thought that this was going to prevent him from coming to Florida. It was a desperate move on his part, and one that's really not going to work for two reasons. First, he complained that he had some kind of medical appointment, although I think the appointment he had, he claimed, was supposed to be with the government, which won't be granted. But if he had a medical appointment, they would simply have a couple deputies escort him to wherever he had to go and stay there while he went through whatever medical procedure he had to go through, and then he would be returned to the county jail. So that excuse isn't going to wash. Now, Phil McConnell claims he can't fly due to an inner ear problem. Kind of interesting, since Phil McConnell used to be a commercial pilot, but we'll let this one slide. What Phil McConnell may wind up doing instead of flying is taking that van ride to Florida. It would take at least 2 days, probably 3. But Phil McConnell would eventually wind up in Florida. Now, this is the problem for Phil McConnell in how these things are done. This is something I'm quite familiar with. I've covered enough of these things. But when a state prisoner, and this is an important emphasis because Phil McConnell is a state prisoner. He's not a federal prisoner. This is a state law he's alleged to have violated. And he's under the jurisdiction of the state of Florida, not the federal government at this point. When prisoners are transported by a county, municipality, or the state, these jurisdictions provide their own transportation. So this means that 2 deputies from Florida would have to drive up a transport van to Wisconsin. So Phil McConnell's going to encounter 2 very unhappy SWAT agents that have had to make this long trek up to Wisconsin to pick him up. So he's already off to a bad start. So they pick up Phil McConnell, they throw him in the back of more than likely it's going to be an SUV. Chevy Suburban or a GMC Tahoe or one of the larger SUVs that are equipped for prisoner transport. It's not going to be a bus, and it's not going to be a van per se, because there's only one man, and he's medium security, so they're not going to need some big armored car style van to bring this guy back to Florida. Phil McConnell's going to be sitting in the back of an SUV. Now, there's going to be breaks on the way back. They're not going to be able to make the trip in 1 day. They're probably not going to be able to make the trip in 2. It's probably going to make a total of 3 days for these guys to get back. Because, you have people have to go to the bathroom, people have to eat, people have to put gas in the vehicle. The average SUV gets about 300 miles per tank. Some a little bit more, some a little bit less, but on average, 300 miles per tank. You have 20-gallon tanks at 15 miles to the gallon, and that's 300 miles. Maybe a little bit more. If you get one of these vehicles that's equipped with a larger tank or an auxiliary tank, then your mileage goes up to maybe 500 or 600 miles. But people generally don't like driving 6 hours at a stretch. They're not truck drivers. These are deputies that primarily are home based. They don't make long trips routinely. So I would say that they're probably going to drive 2.5 to 4 hours. They're going to stop. They're going to drive another 2.5 to 4 hours, and then they're going to stop for the night. In other words, they're going to drive about 10 hours a day. Now, where are they going to stop? Now, people might assume that they're going to check into the nearest Quality Inn, Ramada Resort or something, and they're going to, order pizza and watch TV. Nope, that doesn't happen. There's arrangements that are usually made in advance. There's a network that's put in place by various prisons throughout the country that accommodate law enforcement officers that are doing prisoner transport. What'll happen is when the SWAT deputies are plotting out how they're going to get from point A to point B, they're going to make arrangements with individual prisons on the way back to Orlando, or on the way down to Fort Lauderdale, to house Field McConnell for the night. So Field McConnell will be taken to the local county jail in most cases. He will be put in a holding cell, and they're not pleasant. And he'll remain there overnight. Next day, the two deputies will show up. Now, it will be the two deputies that go to the nearest hotel, grab themselves some beer and pizza or whatever it is they do on their time off, get themselves a good night's sleep in a nice, comfortable bed. They're going to take a nice hot shower, shave, do all that stuff people do when they get up in the morning, brush their teeth, so on and so forth. And they're going to hop in their little SUV, and they're going to go over to the county hoosgow, and they're going to pick up Mr. McConnell. And away they go. Now, as far as breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there's any number of ways that the deputies can handle this problem. They can go to McDonald's or someplace and get takeout. They can go to a restaurant and allow Mr. McConnell to eat as long as he behaves himself. But then, and Mr. McConnell may be allowed to go to the bathroom, but he's going to be escorted into the bathroom. And so on and so forth. The alternative would be that the deputies would stop at jails and they would eat in the jail cafeterias. Field McConnell would go in, he would get his lunch in the jail cafeteria, the deputies would go to the employee commissary and get themselves a bite to eat. Everybody would hop back in the SUV and continue on their way to Florida. And this cycle would repeat itself until Field McConnell reached Fort Lauderdale. He would then be marched into a little room in the back of the reception area. He would have his mugshot taken. That mugshot would be published as it is public information. So the minute the mugshot is published on the Broward County inmate roster, we would know that Field McConnell is in Broward County. Because they don't take and use the mugshot from Wisconsin. They take their own. Because they want to show what Field McConnell looked like the day he showed up in Florida. And so, fresh mugshot, fresh fingerprints, the whole 9 yards. He'll be dressed in prison orange, which is what the uniform is in Broward County. And his Florida vacation will start. He'll probably appear before the judge within 48 to 72 hours. And that process will last about 5 minutes. And then there will be a hearing scheduled. And it is at the hearing process that I am likely going to start going to Fort Lauderdale. Because unless the booking happens on a day that's convenient, I don't see changing my schedule to go all the way to Fort Lauderdale for a 5-minute interview in front of a judge. Now, I may go down there anyway if it's part of other business that I have with Broward County Court Administration. So I'll address that when the time comes. But as it stands now, I would be covering the events as best I could from here in Orlando and save my trips to Fort Lauderdale when I can be more productive. So that is where I stand on that right now. Now, Cynthia Abzug is going to be in court at roughly the same time that Field McConnell is, which I think is kind of ironic. Now, it is my understanding that her appearance has to do with her extradition back to Colorado. It is my understanding that she is fighting extradition the same way Field is. Now, I could be wrong. She may already be back in Colorado and that the Wednesday proceeding in her case is something entirely different. I have not been following her situation that closely, and there's not a lot of information coming out because the judge in Colorado has sealed the case. And so until these individual courts decide that they're going to release information, or Cynthia does so on her own, we're not going to know a whole heck of a lot about what's going on. And Cynthia has her favorites as far as who she's going to call and talk to on these various social media outlets. So it is unlikely I'm going to learn firsthand anything about Cynthia Abzug. I'm going to have to rely on monitoring these other sources of information. And I will check with the courts from time to time to see if stuff comes out. But it is likely that anyone wanting information on Cynthia Abzug, they're probably going to get it elsewhere first before I get my hands on it. All I'll do is I'll interpret it after reporting what it is going on with her case and go from there. You know, I am not what one could call a professional media person. This is primarily a hobby, for a lack of a better word. I do these live streams, I do this online coverage because I'm interested in what it is I'm covering down there. And because of that, I am limited on what I have access to. I have roughly the same access to information that anybody in the general public would. I'm basically doing people's work for them in that I am checking sources of information that they could check if they so desired. You know, try to save people a little work and to offer input on my social media sites for people to judge. And it's just like we're watching a football game and then we put our own take on how the football game is going. And this is standard of anyone that gets involved in social media. They're basically putting their own spin on the events at hand. And this is another reason why I will not accept funding from this particular individual that contacted me under the conditions that she spelled out, because that would be wrong. It takes away from what I am trying to do. You know, it would have been a pretty generous offer because this woman does have the resources to offer this compensation, but it's something I simply cannot do. I would rather not go to Fort Lauderdale if it had to be under those conditions. Now, I understand that there are other scams out there, for that's what they are, involving missing children and also involving mothers caught up in the CPS system in a negative way. And I do intend on looking into these various scams as I get the chance going down the road. Now, I'm going to try and be neutral because it's not a good thing to automatically call somebody a scammer simply because they're doing something similar to what Bill McConnell is doing. What you have to do is you got to look at these individual accusations to see why it is that these people are being labeled scammers and basically prove it so that you're honest about what it is you're uncovering. Because you don't want to get the reputation of just being someone that goes around smearing people just to get attention. That's what I accused Tim Holmseth and Bill McConnell of doing, and I don't want to fall into that same trap. So before I automatically come out and say this is a scam that's going on, I'm going to look into it and see if there really is a scam, or I'm at least going to indicate why these people feel that this particular situation is a scam. You know, I would hope that there are legitimate individuals out there who in their own way are trying to do something about the various issues. But at the same time, if it turns out these individuals are operating scams, they need to be exposed. At a bare minimum, attention needs to be drawn to the public of what these people are doing so they can decide not to support these actions. And generally that means that you don't give money to these people and you don't get involved with them if you are a victim of something that has to do with CPS. There's a lot of unqualified people with good intentions and bad intentions getting involved with trying to help mothers caught up in these various situations, and it's the worst thing you can be doing. Or decisions are made by these mothers and the agencies they're dealing with that could have effects on these people for the rest of their lives, not only with the mothers but with their children. And thus you have to be doubly careful when you get involved with these individuals. Because if you start interfering with the custody of the children in a way that the mother makes a bad decision, you might find yourself in a position of liability, and you also may be responsible for damaging permanently the lives of the woman or the child and the child or children involved in these cases. Now, it must be understood that in certain circumstances, CPS was justified in stepping in. The mother did something that caused her to come to the attention of these agencies, and that she may in fact be guilty of whatever charges are brought against her as a result of any investigation. This is not a 100% guilty system in CPS. There are likely abuses going on in the system, and these abuses must be addressed, but they must be addressed properly and handled properly, not just handled willy-nilly by someone that decides to form an association, a task force, or an affiliation of some kind to combat whatever abuses might exist. Because it has to be done in a way that you're not harming the mother or the children unintentionally, and that you are not being unfair to those who are honest, dedicated employees of these various agencies. People generally get involved in family law and so forth because they care about the children as much as they care about the mothers. They care about the families. Their mission is to keep families together and to help resolve whatever issues are in place. These various agencies are not organized for the sole purpose of sucking in money from government grants. There may be cases where this is partially true, but it can be addressed. It can be addressed through appropriations. It can be addressed as to specifics as to what they're allowed to do with the money, and so forth. Now again, if anybody thinks that they can make a living being a foster parent, you might want to do your homework on number one, how you are paid, what is the conditions of payment, and how much it is you're getting paid. I don't know if I repeated myself, but if I did, I did. And this is most important. What restrictions come with the money you get from CPS? Because CPS doesn't throw you a check every month and say, here, go spend the money. It's your money. The money technically belongs to the child that you're fostering. It's allocated to the child for their share of expenses. It's allocated to the child so that clothing and hygiene products are supplied to the child, and so forth. Medical care, so forth. This is the reason for these allocations. It's just not to pay the foster parent for being a babysitter. In some cases, you have to fill out an expense report to tell the agency where the money's going. They want to know where this money is going. And so this has to be reported. If the child is on disability and is receiving Social Security, that money belongs to the child. You cannot touch it for any reason. That money is closely guarded by the government agencies involved, and this must also be reported to the agency before any money is touched from Social Security. So there's all kinds of checks and balances that are in place that, this is not as much of a gold mine as people think it is. If you're getting into foster parenting to earn a living, you picked the wrong reason. And it will come out in the interview as to why you're getting involved in fostering. And any abuse by a foster will be dealt with severely. There's a lot of stereotyping with fostering, which is unfortunate because it makes it that much harder to find foster parents because of the stigma that's attached to getting in that situation. And this is something people should think about when they are criticizing fosters. That they are making it that much harder for a child to be removed from a hazardous situation. I get people that say, okay, let's take it to a church, let's find a family member, all kinds of reasons. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the mothers involved in these cases are not your average mother, like a single mom that may be the victim of a divorce or a victim of domestic violence that she had to clear out and this sort of thing. A lot of times, in a huge number of these cases, are women that are drug addicts that may have gotten pregnant from being prostitutes or getting into one-night stands, and they have a child that's in an extremely bad drug-infested situation. And it is these mothers that have the children taken away for the benefit of the child. Because the mother is usually on drugs that she can't get off of. She doesn't want to get off the drugs. The only reason she wants the child is because of food stamps and government assistance, and not any love for the child. There may be an abusive adult in the house, male or whatever, that is abusing the child in the worst ways imaginable, so it's safer to get the child out of the situation. This is what CPS is for. Now, what Cynthia Abzug should have done, and any advocate out there should have done, is taken this $10,000 plus and hired a good, competent, experienced attorney in this area of work that could have helped Cynthia deal with the situation. Not be getting mixed up with a bunch of crackpots, shipping her to safe houses all over the country, coming up with diplomatic passports, bodyguards sleeping on couches, and this other stuff. That should have been a clear indication to Cynthia Abzug that she was getting in a bad situation. And this is what the judge is going to be asking her when she appears in court. They're going to ask this woman what possessed her to get involved in this situation, that she should have been intelligent enough to realize that something was not legitimate about what was going on. And this is what this guy from Northwest Liberty News should have done. He should have brought this out. He should have said that Cynthia should have seen at the onset that she was not getting in a good situation. And this has to make me question about the motivation of Northwest Liberty and how he may or may not be involved in this situation himself. You know, if he directed Cynthia Abzug to Field McConnell at any time, then he's just as much responsible for what happened as Field McConnell is. Because he butted in too much to the situation. Instead of reporting on the situation, he got directly involved. He interfered. And his interference may have cost this woman custody of her children. You know, that's something he needs to think about. You know, before all these social media pundits start having temper tantrums on their individual sites about what happened to Cynthia Abzug and start hurling bombs at CPS, they need to understand that there are things they should not be doing themselves, and that is getting directly involved in these cases. Now, you can listen to the concerns of the mothers, you can talk about the concerns of the mothers, you can do criticism, but you should not be getting directly involved with these agencies, because you're going to make matters worse. It goes into the negatives column when these agencies are making considerations as to whether or not these women are going to retain custody of their children or get them back, whatever the case might be. They're going to say this woman cannot exercise sensible, sane judgments, and they're going to deny custody. So social media pundits, you need to think before you act. You need to understand your influence. You know, and there's some pretty large social media outlets out there that have thousands of subscribers, people that listen in. Northwest Liberty is one of these. This is a very large media empire. He does all kinds of stuff. He's done this kind of stuff I wouldn't mind doing someday, and that is multicasting over a number of different platforms. He's got several different websites. He's got blogs, podcasts. He's got the whole thing. He's a full-time social media journalist. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. And a primary responsibility is to be responsible to who it is you're reporting about. That mother of the children you're trying to help is dependent on your actions in more ways than one. Because what you say or do on social media could affect her, and it could affect her case. And because of that, you have to be especially careful how you handle it. You know, Wednesday we're going to find out what the effect of the coverage on Cynthia Abzug was. Did these social media outlets cause her to lose her children, cause her to go to jail, or not? That remains to be seen. Which brings up something else that seems to be on the sidelines right now. And that is that Field McConnell and everyone associated with the Children's Crusade and the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force are, it is alleged, under investigation by multiple law enforcement agencies. It is said that they are under investigation by the state of Colorado, as far as their involvement in the Cynthia Absug case, their activities with another case is being looked into, the woman with the 5 children, since that has been brought to the investigators' attention. They're also being investigated for their claims of being agents of the United States government. They're under investigation for their fundraising and declaring themselves as agents of the United States government. And I don't care how many times Kirk Pendergrass denies this, but that's exactly what they're claiming. Because when someone like Kirk Pendergrass says that they are contracted by the United States government to provide loss prevention, that is being an agent of the United States government or any government agency, be it local, county, state, or federal. And if you are lying about that, it's a felony. It's about as clear as you can get. So as long as you keep saying that you're under contract with the United States government to do loss prevention, you're committing a felony. And if you're going around stating that the Children's Crusade has any part of the federal government or are falsely working to save children, you are also committing a felony. It's called wire fraud. It means you're getting money over the internet by deceptive means. False advertising. The false advertising part, of course, brings in the Consumer Protection Agency. Because then you're committing retail fraud against the public. It's a very broad term. Wire fraud also comes in under there. And then there's the one agency that's coordinating all this with the various agencies. I've mentioned them before. Joint Anti-Cybercrimes Command. So they're getting it from all sides. And these investigations take time. And so it may be a while, maybe months before we hear from the federal government. But at some point, it's going to start happening. It's my understanding, by the way, that the questioning has already started, that at least one individual has been approached by a government agent. I saw it on the internet someplace, that someone has been questioned about what's going on. So, like I said, you start seeing a bunch of cars running around in your neighborhood with government-issued license plates from the General Services Administration on them. You might be in your best interest to have some coffee and donuts ready, because you might be getting a visit. Now, as these groups get larger and their influence with the public increases, this is going to give an incentive for the authorities to start looking into your actions. Find out just what the hell's going on. And you might bring attention from the Internal Revenue Service for any money that's coming in. Because if you're not properly registered with the IRS as a 501 series organization and any of the subchapters that go on there, there's multiples. There's like non-profit, not-for-profit, all kinds of things in there. And you have to choose the one that's specific to your organization, but you have to be registered with the IRS. You have to turn in financial reports. You just can't say, okay, I'm a 501c3 and just suck the money up and spend it as you please. You have to account for it. It has to be on that little sheet. And if you're paying a member of the board a salary, that person has to file as an employee, and he has to file a regular return as an individual. And this all gets cross-checked. You simply can't go out there and say, well, I'm the head of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. I'm drawing a salary of $250,000 and your tax is exempt. No, you are an employee of that agency. And you have to pay federal income taxes and in some case state income taxes on that salary. So you're not off the hook. And on top of that, you got to pay both halves of the, you got to make sure your Social Security's paid and all that. And that's something the agency also has to do. The agency has to provide you with Social Security, what they call the 3 deductions from Social Security. There's also unemployment insurance that has to be deducted. All kinds of stuff that the agency, profit or not, has to provide their staff. And I can guarantee you that nobody in these various organizations, be it the Children's Crusade, the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, or Preacher Dan, are following IRS regulations when it comes to reporting your income. So you people better start boning up on your tax laws. It's a little too late because you're already in violation. The IRS will come after you and say, hey, you got back taxes you got to pay, bud. Social Security Administration is going to want to talk to you about all that Social Security you haven't been paying in. And there's going to be all you people that live in states that have income tax, they're going to want to talk to you. Because you have to file separate paperwork with your state when you're running any kind of an organization. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, even if you're a chapter of the Boy Scouts, you got to file paperwork with the government. It's just the way things work. You know, if you're taking money to take kids to a jamboree, they have to know that the money went for the jamboree and not to pay for beer and cigarettes. So, all these investigations are going on. Because people that know these laws, people like me that have been in business and know what the IRS requires of you as a business, are reporting these things to these various government agencies. And the government agencies take note of this stuff. It takes time. You're not going to get Polaroid results. You people out there that have done your reporting that you haven't seen any results yet, you know, you need to be a little patient. The government is not known to be speed racer. You're not going to get supersonic results. They take their damn sweet time. They're slow as molasses. You know, for any number of reasons. First of all, they have a heavy workload. They're not just going to drop everything and go after your case. It's going to be put in a slot. And they say, okay, we're going to dedicate 15 minutes a week to this particular case. Or something comes across their desk and say, okay, let's file this with the case. Well, what happens is as this paperwork accumulates, all the complaints accumulate, all the details start coming in, victim statements and so forth, then they start looking into it. It kind of rises because there's a level of importance that there's assigned to any case that's reported to the government, any complaint. And so it has to reach a certain level for the government to start doing something about it. And it's got to be done in a way that you don't look like an idiot. You know, you got to be straightforward to the point, saying that this is going on. This charity is taking money under false pretenses. This is what they claim. This is what they're doing. And you do it in a straightforward, dry, government-esque fashion. You don't call up and saying, this jerk going around pretending he's this, that, and the other thing. This guy's a nut. This guy's that. That's ancillary information that will have a negative impact on your report. You have to be specific, fact-based, to the point. It's kind of like reporting a car accident. Say car A was going east on Highway 1, car B was going south on Highway 2, car B did not stop at intersection, impacted car A on left side. something along the order. You keep your report to the facts. You leave emotion out of it. You leave any derogatory comments out of it. You basically just say, I feel this individual is in violation of such and such law, that they are taking funds under the pretense that they are an agent of the United States government, that they are the head of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, or they're a press secretary for the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. And you say, I'm concerned about the actions of these individuals and would appreciate it if you would investigate this complaint. Something along that line. What you want to do is sound professional. And this gives it a little bit more weight when the investigator starts looking into it. Because it's a sincere complaint. It's not a get back at you because you don't like the political agenda of the person you're reporting. You have to remain politically neutral. You have to remain emotionally neutral. You just have to do a straightforward complaint, being specific. Cite the specific statute. At a minimum, you want to let them know that you believe they're engaging in wire fraud, that they are accepting funding under false pretenses. They're under deceptive means, to be more specific. That gives you weight. So anybody that's considering reporting anyone for these scams, this is what you need to do. Take the time out to figure out how you're going to report. And then gather your evidence and report. And be patient. It takes time. It takes a long time. But eventually, the right bureaucrat's going to see on this report, and they're going to say, well, this needs to be looked into, and it's going to get looked into. And people are going to start paying the price for what they're doing. These people are breaking the law. And at some point, they're going to have to account for their actions. They're going to have to go to court, and they're going to have to prove that they're not breaking the law. Now, if they can prove they're not breaking the law, then there's not much we can do about it, except report that we disagree with the way they're doing things. But if they are breaking the law, then hopefully something will be done to get them to quit doing what it is they're doing. Not all of them are going to quit. You know, the ones that go to jail might quit. The housewives that are running these operations might quit. Some of the underlings that are doing the publishing of this information might quit. But others, they'll just go on and do it somewhere else. They'll change the name, change a few things around, and they'll just continue it. Because the money is too much of a temptation. There's a lot of money involved in these things. And so people aren't going to easily give up making that kind of money. You know, you're basically just sitting in your living room coming up with these weird theories and reaping the benefits. It's one of the most efficient work-at-home schemes to come up. So it's going to be a hard thing to stop. So the best thing you can do is mitigate. You know, try and cut down on the amount of damage that's done by these people. Say, we may not stop it completely, but we're going to slow it down. And you try and make people aware that might be in these situations, the mothers of the children who get involved with these scammers out of desperation, to say to them that you're going the wrong way here. You need to do something else. You need to get a hold of someone that is legitimate. a legal aid fund of some kind. You know, it would be nice if there are lawyers out there that would form an association to try and help people in these situations. You know, do pro bono work, which is part of your oath when you join the bar, to do pro bono work for these mothers to try and see if there's a way to help them out. At the very minimum, to tell them what they can do on their own to fight their battles instead of getting involved with all these crackpots. It's actions like these that it would actually be better. You know, hopefully someone will come up with that idea and run with it. So until later, this is William K. Murtaugh, Mark Witness 1. Have a good one.